Hi, I'm David Cohen. Welcome to a four-part series on leadership. Our guest today, and for the next four parts, is Tom Marazzo. Not a household name by any means, unless it's his house. Tom was thrust into a leadership role with the Freedom Convoy, the truckers event that happened in Ottawa at the end of January and into February. It was the event that either galvanized many Canadians or it upset others. And that in and of itself is the risk you take when you choose to step in, lead, speak up, and act. Some won't appreciate you. Some will. Some will support you right to the end. So in this first part of my interview with Tom Marazzo, which was just recorded on Friday, March the 18th, Tom will share how he got involved with the Freedom Convoy and how his involvement and how the event came together. You're in for a treat. I'm going to separate the over 2-hour interview into four parts. And this is part one. Please enjoy and thank you for being here. Comment below and we'll look forward to seeing you on part two. Well, I'm really excited to have our guest here today and have the honor of interviewing our guest. His name is Tom Marazzo, and he served with Canada's Armed Forces. He's taught at Georgian College. He has an MBA, and he's a freedom fighter. Whoa. I'm not sure mainstream media shared the many press conferences held during the Freedom Rally and the convoy that the truckers became famous for in Ottawa back in late January and into February. However, if you watch YouTube or certain Facebook channels and certain Facebook groups, you probably got behind this movement for the 3.5, 4 weeks that it existed. And you would see that many of the daily meetings and briefs and updates were led by Tom Marazzo and Tamara Litt as well. Tom was eloquent, clear on the goals of the Freedom Convoy, heart-centered, and thrust into a leadership role that he kind of stumbled onto. And that's what we're going to talk about today, as well as leading through the storm. Tom Marazzo, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that intro. It was really nice.
Thanks. Well, that's what showed up for me whenever I saw you speak. It was like, man, you're so thoughtful. Actually, I thought you were a lawyer. Like I thought you were really up to date on the legalities of everything.
Well, this has been a crash course for so many people over the last 2 years on the law, the Constitution, the Charter. As a gift, this Christmas, I received a copy of the Constitution for a Christmas gift, and I take it everywhere. It's pocket size. I take it everywhere.
Wow. Yeah. Well, we're going to get to all this because
sure.
I've got so much to ask. So the convoy, the movement, the rally, it didn't just happen and, all of a sudden all the trucks showed up in Ottawa. It was really well thought out and planned before you even came onto the scene. And so during the past 2 years, where our freedoms, not just here in Canada, but worldwide, have really been eroded, from medical freedoms to where we can gather, who we can see. We can't even see grandma. What we wear, if we can have Christmas, a wedding, a business event, all of these have been taken away from us slowly but surely. So when during these past 2 years, because we just had the anniversary of yesterday,
yes,
years ago, that here in the province, they shut everything down, the first lockdown. When
yes.
in the past 2 years, did we realize that something was up with this newfound political control and the dictates of the state was a massive overreach? When in these past 2 years, did you realize, hey, something's up with this?
I think on the first day. On the first day. And this is something I've asked many people. I was trying to come up with sort of that magic formula, and I asked so many people about, like, people that in my perspective are awake to this government overreach. And I've got a pretty good sense of the types of people that I've met that were awake very, very early on. And it was difficult. It was difficult to be one of the one of the ones that I would perceive to be fully awake from day one. You know, it's kind of like, you know, when you have a baby and you find out too early, and now all of a sudden you got to wait the entire pregnancy to meet your child.
Mhm.
Whereas if, you know, you were a couple months late, or you figured out, you know, maybe 3 months into it, the wait's not so long. But you know, in terms of the amount of time that I have been awake to this, it's been a really long 2 years. Um, because the reason it's so long is because you know, I've got the battle fatigue from seeing this from my own perception, and believing that something was off from day one. And it was hard in the beginning because you couldn't talk to your friends, you couldn't talk to your neighbors or coworkers or family members, because, you know, not so much for fear of being ostracized, but for fear of making people you loved face a very harsh reality, and then not having all the answers to continue on with them. Like, why put them through the, it's not so much why put them through the stress, it's just you knew you were going to put them through a lot of stress,
Mhm.
and you didn't have the answers to help, like, not say solve the problem, but get through the problem together.
Yeah.
So in the very early days, nobody wanted to broach that subject with other people for, you know, fear of a very negative reaction.
Yeah, there's a group of them that think that we're wearing, you know, tinfoil hats and conspiracy
Yes.
theories. And,
Yes.
you know, now the joke is, you know, the conspiracies are coming true,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think you have to, you know, pick your
Mhm.
market kind of thing, you know, and
Yes, you
who can
do.
you chat with and who can you, and
Yeah.
and then, you know, slowly raise awareness
Mhm.
bit by
And
bit by bit.
and I'm happy to see that more and more as time goes on, it's a lot easier to broach this subject with people. Um, I find more often than not, they broach it with me first, and then it's like, okay, great. You know, we can talk about this. But on the, you know, at this point, because of my involvement, you know, if people are going to recognize me for my involvement, or any of the time I did on social media, they'll usually come up and talk to me about it anyway. So for me at this point in my battle, it's it's an easier conversation. They just walk up and start talking to me about it, so I don't have to be cautious anymore.
Yeah.
So
Are now you only got coverage really on social media, not in
yeah,
mainstream media.
yeah.
So, are people recognizing you more in your community where you are?
Well, when I first got home, I actually hid quite a bit. I didn't go into the public. I would go to the grocery store late at night when I didn't think anyone would be there, and not because just because if people in the public did recognize me, because I'm in the Kingston area, and this is a very closed off area. I would say, like, they're not. I still see a lot of people driving their cars with masks on.
Mm,
So it's not really a very wide awake area. And so just to avoid kind of the possibility of a confrontation, I just kind of stayed out of the public eye, and I just assumed that after time, my shelf life on being recognized was going to start to wear off very rapidly, especially with the conflict in Ukraine.
mm,
So you know, as time goes by, I worry less and less about it. It only happened to me once where I was recognized at a restaurant, but the people that they were very respectful. They didn't say anything. I could just see them looking at me, talking to their, you know, neighbor beside them, whisper. That person would look at me, but nobody spoke to me. So I think people, you know, Canadians are very respectful of people that have any sort of notoriety.
yeah,
So it's been I haven't had any confrontations, but that really was my big concern, going out and being recognized and somebody confronting me.
yeah. And you know, again, you got to pick your battles, right?
You do. Yeah.
You took really bold action, though, eventually heading into the
Mhm.
school year at Georgian. You were a college
Yeah.
professor at Georgian
Yes.
College. and you raised a valid point among your peers. What happened? This was sort of the genesis of so you had an awareness, first of all.
Yes.
Something was not right in Denmark, so to speak. But then you took a bit more action at the start of the school year. What happened there?
So in about August, about 2 weeks before school started in September, Georgian College came out with their vaccine mandate. And I wasn't even expected to go back to campus probably maybe until this summer because I taught software there. So there was really no pressure or need for the software faculty to be back in a classroom teaching. But they put out this vaccine mandate policy, and I fundamentally disagreed with it. And so I was really offended by the disrespectful language in the campus-wide email that went out from the president of the college. I found the language extremely unprofessional and very aggressive and just inappropriate. And words or phrases like "make no mistake," it's a threat, in the way it came across, and I didn't appreciate it at all. And so I had taken as many faculty as I could find, and I did an internal email to the entire, like about 250 plus people, including the president, the VP of HR, a bunch of the deans that I knew, my supervisor, my coordinator, and I sent an email saying, this is immoral, unethical, and illegal, and that I didn't understand how they were going to get around 10, and I listed the 10 areas of Canadian law. And I did the research on the law, but I also belonged to a group called Police on Guard, and they had created a document outlining all of the different sections of Canadian law that these mandates were violating. So I took that and I put it into the email. And I also said in that email that, are you aware that there are class action lawsuits starting against universities and college in Ontario that have already put out their mandates? But I never said I was part of any of that. And I just said, are you aware? And one of them was through Rocco Galati. And then I made a statement in there. I said, some of you may find this frustrating, this email, and some of you may find some comfort in the fact that somebody else feels the same way as you do. And if you do, reach out to me, email, and I put my personal email in there. And so within 4 days, I was fired with cause for sending that email. And the union completely just abandoned me. And there are several others that were on leave without pay or terminated, staff and faculty, for refusing to partake in this experiment. So there's 26 of us in a group right now, and we're at various stages in the legal process. And of course, with a collective agreement, you have to give the union first right of refusal to deal with it before any lawyer will talk to you. But I'm actually in the process. I've been talking to a couple lawyers about DFR, so duty of fair representation, going actually after my union, because I'm not going to get my first arbitration until May, even though I was fired in September.
Long time.
It's a long time. It's ridiculous, so I am talking to lawyers, and we'll see how that unfolds. But I loved teaching. I enjoyed my time there. I taught part-time pay, full-time hours for 2 years, almost to the day, and I loved it. That's what I wanted to do. And then COVID hit, and everybody's world got turned upside down. I went from teaching in starting a club with a bunch of students to build or write the software for a self-driving or an autonomous vehicle, to 2 years, or not even 2 years later, like being fired. So, I miss the teaching, I miss the student interaction, but I've obviously moved on to another cause that's bigger and I think more worthy.
So how did that start? Like how, so, so already I'm seeing a picture in your life, and, there's sort of a, not sure about if everything's kind of kosher with what's going on. There's a lot of legal issues and political issues. How did you kind of fall into this work that you're doing now with the Freedom Convoy? How did that all happen? Because it was very sort of, it was almost like you weren't looking for it, that's for sure. It found you. Share that journey.
That's probably a great way to characterize it. It found me. I wasn't looking for, being in the center of a storm, and I was in my kitchen. So the convoy actually arrived on Friday into Ottawa, and I was watching. I was glued to social media trying to find out. I went down to the highway. I was trying to help a friend of mine who was on his 25 acres, cleared a spot, got porta potties, all sorts of food, and to park the truckers on his property. And it was through that friend and another person connected to that effort, where on the Sunday I got a call saying, what we need in Ottawa is somebody with your experience in the military to come to Ottawa and help us kind of coordinate and deal with a lot of the logistics now that we are in Ottawa. And so from the time of that phone call, I think within 3 hours, I was in a conference room full of truckers and a couple of Ottawa police. And, I was just kind of quickly ushered into this meeting. And, the person that brought me there was from Canada Unity, James Bowder, and his wife, Sandy. And I go into this meeting, and we walk in, and right away, the two police officers tell me, okay, turn off your phone, and what's your name? And, so I gave him my name, and one of the truckers said, wow, you actually gave him your full name, and I said, well, I put my name on everything I do. And then James had introduced me to everybody and said, this is Tom, he's a retired military. He's here to help with the logistics of all this. And so I sat down at the table and I continued to listen into the meeting. And, that was my first introduction to the convoy. And at the end of the meeting, it was really funny because the meeting concluded, and one of the truckers, before he let everyone go, pointed to me and said, okay, everybody, wait, I want to hear what he has to say. I was like, well, my first thought was, well, where am I sleeping tonight? Right? Because I literally parked my car, walked into this meeting.
And it was like minus 30 around then.
Oh yeah, it was cold. It was cold. I remember getting into the room and my everything on my body was numb. And all of a sudden I just had this feeling that everybody was looking to me as if though now I was in charge. And I was like, well, that's not what I was really expecting. And the joke is now that, I showed up just to hand out warm soup, right? That's the joke. But my involvement very rapidly evolved into many different areas and in many different things. And I was really happy about that, that my role did start to evolve. Every single day I was doing something different, in trying to advance the cause. And that was really nice, because I would say about a week after that is when I brought in a good friend of mine who's a retired naval officer. And so I started kind of bringing in other military people that spoke the same language as I did. And it was just efficient. And, we literally almost on a telepathic level when we talk and we communicate, because we all at that point know it needs to be done. And so that was really extremely helpful. And once I started to surround myself with a few military people, and again, we didn't run it like it was a military operation.
No.
But it was, from a logistical point of view, a lot easier. And when they came, it freed me up to get more involved in the higher level, strategic planning of what we were trying to achieve. So that was really beneficial, surrounding myself with people that spoke the same language that I spoke. So that actually ended up working extremely well for us. But in truth, something like that convoy, would have taken 6 months to a year for the military to plan that entire event as an operation. In obviously tactically we would have considered all that, but we weren't there for tactical purposes. We were there as a protest of what we had experienced for 2 years. And a really good, he's also a retired military friend. He said to me the other day, he said, you have to understand that the trucker convoy in every area of Canada was the People's Emergency Act. And when he said that, I was like, you're right. That's very, very powerful. That the people didn't have any other recourse. And tomorrow we're having worldwide freedom across this planet, number 7. And it is the People's Emergency Act that they're declaring against the governments of various provinces and countries. You look at the convoys, there was 27 countries after Ottawa that initiated their own freedom convoys with trucks.
Yeah.
27 countries.
It's funny, there's one in the US right now, and we're not hearing much about it.
Yeah, I did a great interview last night with some people in Philadelphia who are trying to get information about it. And the only way you can get any info is on social media. And from my understanding, they're actually on the outskirts of DC right now, because the authorities won't let them get into the city, but they're all on the outskirts. But unlike our leaders here in Ottawa, the absolute cowardice of our politicians in Ottawa, different in the States, because Senator Cruz and Johnson, and I believe a third senator on day one, met with the leaders of the convoy. That's all it would have taken. Every time I went on did any media statements, I was calling for the government to send a representative to talk to us. And to this day, I never spoke to one of them. Not one of them, which is disturbing.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that, because I want to,
Sure.
that's one of my questions I want to ask you. And it is disturbing, it's disturbing. It was disturbing for us watching it on social media channels to see this.
Yes.
And it was also disturbing to compare mainstream media with this alternative media that we can now pretty well watch. I mean, that's even being censored now too.
Yes.
So it's just, the definite difference in messaging is alarming.
Yes.
At least to me, I find. Was, in terms of, we're going to move more into leadership as well. Do you feel like you were made for this role? Like all your background, your training, your studying, your work?
It's a really great question. And if I'm absolutely being truthful, I think the question is both yes and no. In the sense that, I could probably think of 10 other military officers that are smarter, stronger leaders, more proven leaders, probably had a more clear picture of things that had to happen. But yet I was the one that was in Ottawa. I was the one that was called to Ottawa, and they didn't. And maybe that's just for the universe to answer that question as to why I got the call and maybe some of these other people didn't. But I also think, one of my, and I want to say a gift, is that I can easily relate to every type of person. I don't have a big ego. I'm aware of ego, and I'm aware of the dangers of ego. And when you come from a place where you feel that you're a better person or a smarter person or a superior person, that just leaks through every pore in your body, and people sense that. If you don't have the ability to talk to, let's say anything from a homeless person to the CEO of a major corporation. If you come from a place where there's a pecking order inside that personal interaction, you're going to turn everybody off that you're talking to, because they're going to identify that you're coming from a place of ego instead of coming from a place of sincerity and respect. And so I feel like I'm very fortunate that I have that ability to talk to people no matter what your status is in life. And even as a troop commander, when I was in the regiment, I was a captain, talking to my young soldiers, and sometimes it would shock them that I would know their first name, or that I would know their children's names.
Mm.
And there's a saying that familiarity breeds contempt. When your soldiers are too close to you, they start after a while to disrespect you and start treating you like, oh, well, you're not that important kind of guy. And that, in some cases, with some people, can be true. And I would say that those people don't understand professionalism either.
Yeah.
And when you're leading soldiers in a combat role, as a military officer, I trained almost my whole life for the application of violence against an enemy. And sometimes you don't want to be too close to these people, because you could, some unfortunate circumstance, order them to their certain death.
Mm-hmm.
It's an order that they can't refuse. Now, do you want to be, you can't get too close, because you may not be able to do your job because you're too afraid of getting, your friends killed. But you don't want to be so far away that they don't believe in you. They think that you're just going to sacrifice their lives and go back to your sleeping bag and sleep like a baby. So you have to strike that balance between proving to your soldiers that you care about them, but also communicating to them that they've got a job to do, and so do you. And it's a difficult balancing act, because I know certain military officers that, as far as they're concerned, their soldiers follow orders and they're expendable in war as hell, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then others that care greatly about their soldiers, and they will never take unnecessary risks. Soldiers get killed in training all the time. I had a young female who worked for me for about 10 months. And then we shuffled the entire squadron. She went over to one of the different troops and got killed in a armored vehicle rollover, where she was crushed. And it was devastating. And, soldiers get killed in accidents all the time. Afghanistan, I knew 13 Canadian soldiers that were killed of the 158. And it's part of the culture, and do you close yourself off of it as a human being because you're protecting your own heart? Or do you figure out a way to inspire them, to get them to follow? There are guys that I served with. If I said to them, if I said, listen, David, you got to take that machine gun, and I don't know if you're coming back. Do I want David to follow the order because he has to, or do I want David to do it because I'm the one who asked him to do it? And it's a really difficult line to walk down. I met an amazing man yesterday. He gave me a tour of his facility. He's got a grade 8 education. And I don't know what his net worth is, but what a incredibly humble man. And it was an amazing experience. And we went for lunch, and he saw a couple of his employees in the same restaurant. Not only did he pay my lunch bill, but he paid their bill too. And he drove his truck around the facility where he was giving me a tour, and everybody knew who he was, not just because he was the boss, but because he was a very humble man. I was in his office, and you'd never know like that he was the owner of a major empire.
Wow.
It was as small as my room that I'm sitting in right now. Just no ego, just a humble man. And ego, I think, is one of the most deadly things to a person's ability to lead.
Yeah.
If you're, it'll destroy your ability to lead people.
Yeah.
So yeah, leadership is tough because, when I get to, talk about Ottawa, I wasn't signing anybody's paychecks. They were under no obligation whatsoever to listen to a thing that I had to say, but they did anyway.
What was the culture like with the Freedom Convoy ahead of arriving to Ottawa? And then how did that culture and their mindset shift when you came on board and things started to gather some momentum and steam?
Well, as much as I love the truckers, they were in a lot of cases just out of their depth. Not for a lack of trying. It's just that they didn't have experience with something like this. Whereas for a military guy, this is just a normal exercise, right? Or a normal deployment. And so I immediately felt that there was a vacuum of leadership. And I don't mean to say that in a derogatory way or a negative way. It's just the vacuum was the fact that they couldn't point to one individual person and say, okay, that guy is in charge and that's the guy I'm going to trust because that guy knows what he's doing. Or so far what I've seen is he's making really good decisions that are decisions that I can get behind and I can believe in. And Chris Barber is an exceptionally charismatic, natural leader. I really respect him a lot. Tamara Lich is a very passionate, well-spoken, highly intelligent woman, and people want to follow her. But their job in Ottawa wasn't to do the day-to-day logistical planning and that kind of stuff. They had to be at the high levels, making higher level decisions and leading the truckers. And so for me, I viewed my role as somebody that was supporting them. So I looked at them like, okay, you guys are my boss. Chris Barber and Tamara in a group that we referred to them as the board of directors.
Yeah.
Because of all the money they had to actually incorporate a nonprofit to handle all the money. And so there was 10 board of directors. And so I viewed my role as, let's say, a CEO that was making decisions on behalf of the board. However, when it was major decisions, I devised a strategy and I made my recommendation to the board, and the board had to make the final decision. I worked for the board. That's the way I viewed it. And I think that worked really well. And a lot of times, some of them would just say, listen, Tom, we trust you. You've proven your trust or your worth. We believe in the things that you're saying and you're doing. And as time went on, I was able to build that trust with them. And I could be more autonomous, but I always felt an obligation, a duty to the board because they started this and they were truckers. And I felt that the proper way was for them to make the final decisions. And then if they made the decision on what I wanted to do, I would execute it. And there were times that they wanted to go in a different direction. I still executed their wishes. And, when I didn't agree, I spoke up. But ultimately they had to make the decision. And then they had to go out and sell it to the truckers. And that was another thing. Chris Barber really was so effective of just going and talking one-on-one to the truckers and telling them what was going on and interacting with them. It was great. Like time went on. We had to evolve. I worked with these people, for so long, and half of them I don't even know their last names. I don't know where they live or whatever, but we work so closely, and we really did develop these bonds. But I don't know anything about them. So really, if you take the ego out of the interactions and you remain humble, then you can do your job. Because a friend of mine showed up and he says, you realize there's 1 billion people on this planet that are watching what we do here in Ottawa. And when you put it into that scale, it does get a little bit terrifying. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
And I was surrounded by some phenomenal people, and they would always say, we're praying for you, we're praying. And I would say, please, in your prayers, pray for wisdom and good decision making.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, sorry. I should.
Oh no, it's great. We're with Tom Marazzo. We're talking leadership, especially leading through the storm. I just want to add one other question.
Mm-hmm.
And did you see then an involvement from the beginning of this to the day the police came and military came to break it up?
Yeah, it certainly did evolve. My role evolved once I started bringing in some key people. And then other people's roles started to evolve as well. I was in the very early days. I didn't know anybody. I didn't know who was who, where they were from. So I had to be extremely patient, where I gave myself about 3 full days and I said, okay, these people don't work for you. You don't sign their paychecks. You don't know what their skills are. You don't know their personality. I just told myself, sit back, wait, observe, and figure out who the alphas were. Who were the natural leaders? Who are the people that were getting things done? Then you pick out those key people, and then those are the ones you start tasking with things that need to get done. And then you have to see, okay, did they get it done? Were they legitimate leaders with the actual ability to get things done, or were they just really loud, boisterous people? Were they talkers or were they doers?
Yeah.
And so I had to be very patient with that. And that was really difficult because we were eating up the clock. Okay, because I always had a sense that we were on a clock. And so I didn't want to waste too much time with this, but it was a necessary step, because if I had lost the support of some of these people, especially the ones that were social media darlings, had I lost their support, it would have made it impossible for me to do my job, because they would have been, working against me.
Yeah.
And so you had to run that risk. It's not like I could just say, okay, well, your employment here is terminated, go home. I don't have the ability to do that. All I have is my ability to influence people and to earn their trust. I had to prove myself. At the same time, I was looking for people to prove themselves to me. And so, I had such a diverse group of people that I was working with. I worked a lot with Randy Hillier, and some other really strong and courageous people. And as time went on, though, everybody's role started to evolve, because the situation was starting to evolve. Give, send, go. You saw that what happened with GoFundMe, then Give, Send, Go, then money became an issue, and then fuel. People were the police were confiscating fuel up on Wellington.
Yeah.
So everybody who supported us just started showing up with a jerry can in their hand, right, to confuse them. And I didn't come up with that strategy. I believe Dr. Alexander came up with that strategy, or Dr. Hodgkinson. So, it was all hands on deck, really. And an important thing that I did is I listened. I listened more than I spoke in the early days. And I didn't follow everybody's direction, but I had to listen to so many diverse opinions and beliefs. And I had to know how to diplomatically tell people, listen, I understand what you're saying, but in this particular case, I think this is the wrong strategy for the time being. It may come in the future, or it's like, listen, the reason I don't want to do that is because, for the following reasons. And then they would say, oh, okay, I understand. Right. So for example, there was a lot of people that said, no, let's just ignore the injunction on the horns. Let's just keep blaring the horns, no matter what the courts say. And I would say to them, I disagree, because every day we're sending our lawyers into the courtroom, and our lawyers are the ones that are going to have to stand in front of a very hostile judge because we are disobeying the court order. So it's gonna basically kneecap everything that the lawyers are trying to do on the court side. So we have to work with the judiciary to achieve some of our other objectives. And for the most part, it worked.
Hi, David Cohen here, and hope you enjoyed part 1 of our 4-part series, Leading Through the Storm with Tom Marazzo. It's a really compelling interview, and each part gets a little bit juicier, and there's some more nuggets and information in each one that tells you the journey of what unfolded in Ottawa, from its beginnings to the driving the convoy towards the nation's capital, to it coming to a close on that weekend, that fateful weekend, where the police were brought in to stop what was going on. So stay with us. We have part 2 coming up, and I think you'll enjoy part 2 as well.